afternoon. We'll have a session now on how to modernize IT to exploit the mission. May I now invite Ms. Amita Roy, Senior Director, Solution Architect, Red Hat, on the stage.
The good one, the bad one.
Audible now?
Yeah.
Good afternoon. It's an incredible honor and privilege to be addressing this very distinguished audience about how we can modernize IT to accelerate the mission. For the next 15 odd minutes, what I try to talk about is how technology can help deliver the outcomes for the mission and how Red Hat plays a role. I'm sure we'll all agree, and I think our Air Chief Marshal also alluded to it, the world we're living in today, we're clearly seeing that there is this constant concern about lethal autonomous weapons. We're talking about weaponized bots, drones, and clearly, we are seeing this whole modern warfare moving into the realm of cyber and space. But I guess the analog is also there to stay for some time at least, as we've seen from the real events, right? So in this scenario, the next slide. Yeah. So in this scenario, when a mission is critical, agility is everything. How can we make sure that the decisions that need to be taken in real time can really be supported by the underlying IT systems? How can we modernize some of the legacy infrastructure? How can we modernize some of the processes so that we can really bring agility to the fore? And when we're talking about that, today if you really look at the complexity, we have disparate systems, right? You have infrastructure that kind of spans from bare metals to your data centers, and we're talking about all those sensors, etc. at the edge, right? When you have this kind of complexity, how can you radically simplify? And when we say simplify, we don't necessarily mean that you need to compromise on security, for instance. Okay? When we're saying radically simplify, what we're really saying is that when you have this huge set of connected systems spanning different topologies, different hardware systems, edge sensors, etc., can we look at having a consistent foundation across? Okay? When you have a consistent foundation of an operating system like Linux, then what really happens is you have the agility, the flexibility, the scale, because tomorrow if you're adding more hardware, okay, we're talking about quantum, for example. If you're adding, more complexities to your infrastructure, then you can be sure that you're future-proofing your infrastructure when you have that kind of a consistent foundation. And when we talk about agility, it also builds into the fact that, next slide, we also have to look at how we increase the operational readiness. Today when we talk about operational readiness, we are saying that we should be able to move workloads and data at the point where the decision is being taken. And for that, we need our applications to be a lot more modernized. Now, it may not be practically possible to change everything overnight, right? However, increasingly, we are seeing and we are advising, enterprises to really look at how you can make your entire application landscape a lot more modular. When we say modular, we are saying rather than having monolith applications, we are saying break it down into more granular microservices. Because when you talk about microservices based, architecture, then what happens is it automatically brings in a lot more agility, because now you can only look at working on those services that need to be, constantly, generating the data that is required for the decision-making capabilities. And when we talk about a microservices-based architecture, we are making sure that the data that resides in many of these applications, and sometimes the data also resides in organizational silos, right? So how can we make sure that across, the various domains, you are able to bring the data and also look at all the data that is coming in from all those various, sensors, radars, your intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance systems, your electronic warfare systems, wherever the data is coming from, we are able to make sense of it with the data that is currently there, the new data that is coming in, the ingress, egress, the data could be lying across multiple domains, how we can bring that all together in order to improve the decision-making capability. And this cannot happen just overnight, right? What it really requires is to be able to equip, developers with a kind of tooling that will help them to pick the framework, the language of their choice, or sometimes it's the language in which the programs are already written, right? How can we then, make sure that we build in that modularity, build in that microservices architecture? And it's not just the developers, we have to make sure that those microservices that the developers have developed, okay, now what's happening is your monolith programs have been broken up into small, modular, and pieces of technology, each one being a discrete functionality. So now the operations team will now have a visibility across in terms of all the various artifacts and the complexities, and be able to manage it as a whole. So this then brings us to the next step, which is innovating at the speed of relevance. I'm sure you'll all agree that innovation can happen behind closed doors, it can happen endlessly. But innovation has to happen at the speed of relevance, at the speed at which it is required to actually thwart, whatever are some of the dangers that we are seeing from our adversaries. Now, in this kind of situation, when you want to innovate at the speed of relevance, we need to bring an idea to innovation and production very quickly. And in order to do that, we are talking to a lot of our customers where we say that you have to have a way by which you can continuously develop, okay? You have to have iterative processes continuously deployed, okay? When we talk about CI/CD, it is a process, but at the same time, it needs to also be supported with the right tooling to be able to make it practically possible, right? So, and when we talk about CI/CD, it also automatically brings to the fore what you may have heard as DevSecOps. We're talking about bringing developers, and while we say only DevSecOps, it is pretty much everybody who is committed to that mission. Developers, we're talking about testers, we're talking about security, we're talking about operations, we're talking about everybody is on that same mission, everybody is on that same platform, so that we can start now bringing in a lot of the security decisions up front, shift left, rather than bolt on. Rather than looking at certifications that happen at the end of the life cycle, we are talking about being very intentional about the entire process. So when you're able to do that, you're actually able to innovate, bring your ideas very quickly to the fore, and this is how you can actually innovate, and bring your ideas to production very quickly. And this becomes all the more relevant because today, the kind of complex environment we're talking about, these data points could really be coming from various different sources, right? So how we make sense of all that is really so. And when we're doing all this, we're also talking about moving faster with lesser risk. For a long time, and a lot of defense clients that we talk to have a lot of embedded systems, okay? For a long time, we said embedded systems have air gaps, and therefore, by design, they have separated networks and therefore they're secure. However, today when we're talking about a lot more connectivity, and when we're talking about a whole lot of embedded systems that now need to be connected to each other, then what we're really talking about is the fact that the attack vector is also increasing, right? And today when you're having some of your edge devices that are in very remote locations, right? How are you going to make sure that the patching and the upgrade and the latest security upgrades are going to be available on those devices, right? It's a complex problem, but if you're able to bake in security, and there are different ways that people do it. You could talk about zero trust architectures, right? Assume zero trust. Straight away assume that you start with, not allowing any access privileges unless explicitly defined, right? We are also talking about defense in depth, okay, which means every layer, right from the operating system upwards, every layer has security baked in, as well as what I mentioned earlier in terms of shift left, making sure the entire software supply chain is secure by intent from day one, and making sure, because today the kind of attacks we are seeing are really unforeseen. Like for example, a few years ago, we had this meltdown and spectre kind of attacks, that's what they were named, that were looking at some kind of performance optimization that was happening at the microprocessor level. Okay, and then we are now in the age of artificial intelligence, and in that, while AI has been around for some time, today some of the threats that can be generated via AI, have become increasingly very real. Now, in this scenario, it's good to be intentional about it, from the beginning, and make sure that you are moving faster, but ensuring the integrity of your embedded systems through the right security measures. So how do you leverage, all the data? Today we are talking about the edge, right? Increasingly, why I'm referring so much to the edge is that there is a lot of data that is coming in, from various data sources. And many of these data sources are probably there out there in the field that are generating some data. And this brings again the whole capability that I mentioned earlier about being able to break up your workloads. To be able to break up your workloads, because now, if you're able to do that, then you can look at some of that computing, with whatever limited computing power is there at the edge, some of the processing happening there, and some things that are not time sensitive can then move to your central data center for the processing. And this is only possible if there is a way to actually slice and dice your data to be able to do that. Okay? Otherwise it's not possible, right? And that again brings us back to that whole premise we talked about, which was the microservices architecture. And when you're able to do this, the advantage is also that you can fuse data. Many times, some of these embedded systems, some of these edge devices, they are a single domain, they do something. But if you're able to get a network of such edge devices, each of them generating some data, if you're able to fuse the data together to make some meaning out of it, then you're actually doing something that will help the warfighter on the field be able to make some decisions on the spot. And these things become extremely relevant. And the reason why I'm telling you this is also that everything that I talked about this far, in terms of that consistent foundation that can be there from your, so what applies to your data center, the same principles apply to the edge locations as well. So with that consistent foundation, you're able to actually leverage some of the capabilities that come in, the data that is coming in, and you're able to actually look at the data ingress, the egress, you're able to fuse some of the data, you're able to use AI to make sure that, and today AI has evolved quite a bit. So when you're getting large volumes of data, today we have the computing power to be able to really crunch all the data, process all the data, right? The speeds that we want it. But if we have to make that data really relevant, the data that already resides, in your various systems, if you have a way to get that all together, plus, a solid messaging architecture that will bring in all the asynchronous data that is coming in, and over a period of time, okay, your systems that are able to learn, from, some of the data that is coming in and be able to do some predictive analytics, some proactive remediation, and so on and so forth. So what you really need is a platform that will provide you those capabilities, built on a solid foundation of open source, because we have curated a lot of the best that is available in the open source community and brought that in an enterprise grade secure manner for for you to be able to really leverage data and AI. So, and when you do that, you're able to provide an edge on the battlefield. Because now, if you have a video surveillance camera somewhere, the person there on the field can decide if the data is enough for them to be able to process the data there, or they need to send some of the frames back to a central data center for the processing. You can decide, whether an aircraft that is flying at, 50,000 feet, collecting some data is better, or you have a swarm of drones, each one capturing some data that can all be then combined and use some of these platforms that will help you to process that and make sense of that data, right? So, if you are in a connected battlefield, then being able to correlate all the information to bring it to what we call a data enterprise across your services domains, not just one particular one, then you're bringing in a lot more efficiencies in the battlefield. So in this whole process, right, I talked about creating modular architectures that are microservices based, okay? And when we say microservices based, each of those microservices is encapsulated in what we call a container. Okay? Over a period of time, we have several containers, and then if you are able to manage, all the clusters in which these are running efficiently across, then you are future-proofing your infrastructure. You are building a platform that is providing modularity, interoperability, okay, and you're also having agile integration. So, with that solid foundation, now you could have any physical infrastructure that is lying out there. The integrations lie with thousands of devices and hardware. Okay, the way Red Hat works in the open source community is that since we have an open architecture, since we contribute immensely to the open source community, there are a whole lot of vendors out there that have made sure that they have certified integrations with Red Hat Enterprise Linux. And when you do that, you know that you have a solid ecosystem that will support just about any deployment that you may have today or in the future, or whatever you had existing in the past. And then, as you modernize your apps, you have these containers, microservices I talked about. You may have virtualized environments. You may have third-party applications. You may have ISV applications. All these are guaranteed to work together and guaranteed to work in a secure manner, because, as I mentioned, defense in depth. At every layer, security is baked in so that you are not compromising anywhere. And with this, you have a true what we call a hybrid cloud infrastructure. Because whether by choice or by force, we have had most establishments have evolved into a hybrid cloud kind of a situation, where you have a private cloud, you may have something that is in your on-premise data centers, and so on and so forth, right? Bare metals, edge, etc. So this is typically hybrid. The dimension that we have to add to it is, we say open hybrid. Open hybrid because if you base your architecture on open source principles, then you're making it a lot more resilient for the future. If you are making sure that it is built on open platforms, then you're making sure that it will be agile, and there is interoperability. If you make sure that you have open processes, then you're ensuring that the processes will never be fossilized, and they will constantly be evolving to meet with the changing needs of your mission. And the application development and delivery platforms that support the kind of complexity that we're talking about, the kind of kind of disparate applications that will be running across the infrastructure. Those are all taken care of today as well as into the future. You may start your journey of modernizing some of your applications. Some of the applications may continue to be in world-class environments. But can I manage them both today in a single platform, giving the provision that tomorrow I will move these world-class environments also to containers to make sure that I'm a lot more efficient. So all those capabilities and a lot of what I'm saying would not be practically possible unless you build in automation. We're not talking about doing all these things manually, right? If you're able to automate all your upgrades, your patch management to those remote sensors and edge devices, if you're able to automate everything that I talked about in a DevSecOps cycle, right from what the developer is coming up with to what the operations team is managing. If you're able to automate security, automate your networks, your server provisioning, your upgrade, your patch, etc., and have enough management oversight to see everything that's happening across your enterprise, then that is value. So skills development is clearly important because we're talking about tooling, we're talking about processes, but there are people involved. So getting the right skills, getting everybody bought into a way of doing things will definitely ensure that you're able to proceed confidently on this journey. And we believe that open unlocks the world's potential. 3 decades ago, when Red Hat first, ventured into this business of, making open source more accessible to enterprises, okay, a lot of people thought this business model doesn't work because here is an open source community. A lot of innovation happens in the open source community. There is a lot of ideas that are coming out from there. So if we are able to harness some of that potential that comes from the innovation that are happening there and be able to productize some of these and bring secure products to enterprises that can then use the potential of open source, and we can also take the advocacy back to the open source community. This has been our business model. We have been leaders in steering a lot of the open source community projects across the years, and this is how we believe to work, because we believe that the good ideas can be sourced from anywhere, but at the same time we need to make sure that our clients have a secure set of products that they can work with confidently, knowing that we will support them well into the life cycle of the product, because changes can happen very rapidly in the open source community, and not every enterprise will have the appetite to keep pace with that change, because there are millions of projects, millions, literally. Okay. So we have been working on building the future, making it possible for our clients to be able to insulate themselves from, obviously nobody can predict the future, but what we can clearly do is prepare for it by making sure that we create certain architectures that are based on open standards, open principles, and open organizational cultures, so that it becomes easy for us to be able to adapt to those changing needs. We place our bets on those projects in the community that have the highest potential of returns for our customers in the areas that we operate in, and then we put all our might, as a company behind there. We have several developers employed at Red Hat that only contribute to open source community, not our products. Okay, that's the skin in the game that we have, and that's the confidence with which our clients work with us, because they know that we are here for the long run. So collaborate with us, whether it's in DevSecOps or management automation, data analytics, your hybrid cloud infrastructure. We are committed to make you successful, and we have for several years been engaging with several clients in the public sector. There are several highly visible digital initiatives by the Government of India that have a solid foundation based on open source from Red Hat. And we are extremely proud and privileged to participate in this journey that our country is embarked on. And Baba Kalyani sir had talked about everything that the Prime Minister spoke in the India Today conclave. And we are very happy to also play a small part in this journey in our own capacity. So with that, I would like to thank you all, and I hope to be able to interact with several of you in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Wonderful insight as to how IT can be an accelerator for the mission critical. Coming up next, we have a panel discussion on the way forward for industry and defense sector. I will now invite the panelists to please come on the stage. Lieutenant General V.G. Khandare, PVSM, ABSM, SM, Principal Advisor, Ministry of Defense. Mr. Manoj Kohli, former country head, SoftBank. General Panel.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We are going to be discussing in this panel about the way forward for the Indian economy, where defense as an ecosystem and has a place. In the panel, I will have a very short introduction of our speakers. They are very well known. We have Mr. Manoj Kohli, who has been the CEO of Airtel and also headed the SoftBank. Of course, he knows the Indian culture, the Indian industrial culture, the economic and the financial state and how the future is. So we will hear from him the industry perspective for the future. And we have Lieutenant General V.G. Khandare, infantry officer, who is the longest serving in the defense sector as far in uniform. Post-uniform, he was the advisor to the NSA in defense, and now he is a principal defense advisor to the Raksha Mantri. Welcome, General Khandare and Mr. Kohli. In the infantry, the first thing that we are taught is to find your own position. And if one can find your own position, you can have a fix then you can find out where to go. But I think if you cannot find your own position, and similarly the appreciation, if you cannot find the aim, nothing much can be expected out of you. So I will start with General Khandare. A question: where do you think the defense today stands as far as the indigenization is concerned? With Atmanirbharta, the positive lists coming in, the industry is actually looking at the defense to please tell us what we as industry can provide and how can you make it possible. So it will be just a discussion, and I will request General Khandare to talk about it. Where are we? And then we will decide how we can reach where you think we can.
Thank you, General Pannu, and pleasure to be sharing the dais with such eminent personality from the industry. Where are we? Now, that is something which all of us are clear about one thing, that the journey to Atmanirbhar that has begun. The intent of the government was not merely an announcement. There have been small steps which have been taken. And this is in any case not a one-time, one-step solution. It's a long journey and we've just started. So where are we? If I have to say, we have just started. Now each one of us has to identify our own position. Initially, I think we were all totally dependent on, if there was a technological challenge, we expected DRDO to give us a solution, which to my mind was wrong. As a user, if I can't do my own technology discovery and I expect to outsource this challenge to the scientists, and I try to explain to them that this is my challenge and this is what I need, and then they imagine this is what it is. It's kind of different. You're trying to make someone give you a solution by imagination. It's different for, say, Israel, because there the practitioner himself gets onto the drawing board after about 3 years or so. But in our case, the practitioner is there in field, the scientist is in a laboratory, the industry is in their own factory. So the point is how to get people together. Now this is one challenge together. Even today, these silos are still not as well enmeshed as they should be. Whether it is in DRDO, whether it's in ordnance factory, whether they are in the DPSUs, industry has still done better because they've been hiring now veterans who can guide them, and veterans who actually are visionaries and who are taking the private industry well ahead. You just heard Colonel Bhatia speaking. He's done human service and trying to explain to industry what is expected. Otherwise, you couldn't have seen this attacks coming up. The other issue is, where are we on other points like processes? We need to do a lot. You just heard Amita talking about IT, which has to be incorporated. I think the first place where IT needs to come in is in the processes. And that is the user's issue which has to be sorted out. Processes should be guarded provided they are outcome oriented and result oriented. But because they have been enriched in time doesn't mean that every process is as good. If we are trying to say because we have a tradition of a particular process, I think we need to take a step back, look at it all over again. And this is a point particularly for the practitioners who initiate a process. And I think the process kills the proposal. So I think that is another relevant issue. More important here is one more part, which is the venture capitalists. If IDEX has made such an impact, as Colonel Bhatia sir correctly said, the startup still needs funding. And if IDEX is something where he has won the challenge, the market has to realize that the MOD is backing it. And if the MOD is backing it, there is no going back on that. So the venture capitalist should be quite clear that this is a win-win situation for the industry, and obviously it will be for the services. So very briefly, these 3 points I thought I'll cover, and then we can go ahead in our discussion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kandare. 3 things that you mentioned was that we live in silos. Second thing, you said the journey has just started. And third thing, what I take away from you is venture capital. The funding has to come. Now, these 3 things, the industry has to realize that the time has come for the industry to work together with the Ministry of Defense and those who are into the manufacturing sector and research sector. But largely, I think for reasons which we can talk about separately and are also known, that we invested hugely in DPSUs and relied hugely on DPSUs, which DRDO plus DPSUs never allowed the private industry to come up. So I would request now, Mr. Manoj Kohli, the journey has just started. The MOD is looking at breaking the silos. How can we build that system coming from the industry and from the financial background? How do you think we can contribute to this?
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Kandare. I'm an outsider, so please excuse me if I don't have the facts and data about defense. But I can give you an outside-in view, which is a very frank and candid view. First, let's understand where are we going. I think in 5 years from now, India will be number 3 GDP in the world, which means that in terms of our income levels, total income levels, we'll be number 3 in the world after US and China. Per capita, of course, will be lower, but we'll be a very strong economy, and we are today the fastest growing economy. It's also very important for us to understand that we are the world leaders in software. We export $150 billion of software every year, which is fantastic. Our companies are one of the best companies in the world. The second thing I wanted to share was technology in the next 10 years will impact our lives more than last 100 years. Whatever we have seen in technology in the last 100 years, next 10 years we'll see bigger impact than that. So clearly, the crucial part of technology is software, not hardware. Hardware is secondary, software is primary. And India luckily has its edge in the software development. By that I mean not only software, but AI, machine, ML, robotics, drones, everything. So these two facts we have to keep in mind. One, economically we are number 3 in the world. Secondly, on technology we are close to number 1. If not close to number 1, on massification of technology we are number 1. Many technologies we have massified to millions and hundreds of millions and millions of people, which nobody else in the world has done. So with these two facts behind us, I want to share my thoughts now. With these two facts we have to understand. I'm actually, and I'll compare defense sector to automotive sector. For 35 years after independence, we closed automotive sector. Our sector was closed. And we have only 2 cars. And I was lucky to start with a Fiat. I don't know if you had a Fiat or a Ambassador. First car. Okay, so we were lucky, we got a better car than ours. But for 35 years, there was only 2 cars in that. Not a third. And then Maruti came in early 18. And I think today you see automotive sector, and I've been part of that sector. I was an automotive at one point of time. I was in Japan, in Hamamatsu, and I know Toyota and other companies very well. Today our automotive sector is number 3 in the world. And our component industry, auto component industry, is 6 Sigma quality. They are exporting all over the world, and everyone in the world, including Japan, Korea, Europe, US, are accepting our components. I'm surprised now, coming to the point you made, that the defense sector was not even opened when auto opened. We continue to keep the defense sector closed for 70 years. It was opened how many years ago? Few years back, 5 years back. And I don't understand. It's a strange decision. Whosoever took, I can't conflict with that decision, but it is a strange decision. Because if India has so much need of defense equipment, like what? If India has such a deep strength in software, then why should India not make everything ourselves? I think that is the question you are asking, and that I'm also finding it strange, very surprising that auto opened 35 years back and defense was not opened. And now they are finally opening up. Globally, all the countries, US, Europe, France, Russia, Japan, China, they make their own defense equipment. And they export. Now, let me come to the good news now, because I may have given you bad news till now. Good news is that India now has emerged as a global leader, and that's why we are G20 leaders now, of Global South. Global South has 150 countries, which means all the South countries. I'm not talking of OECD countries. I'm talking of South countries like Asia Pacific, Africa, LATAM, etc. And recently the Honorable Prime Minister had a conference with Global South countries, which means we have certain influence in those countries. I worked in Africa myself. I worked all over Asia Pacific, and I know how much they respect and look up to India. And especially after the last 3-4 years when China had issues. So we have a market ready for us. That's the point I make. 2 great advantages. We source billions and billions of dollars of imports of defense. And we have a market, not only India as a domestic market, but 150 countries in global south, which could source from us. So I find this as tremendous opportunity for Atmanirbhar defense. And I really feel that this should be the fastest track sector in the country. And I don't know whether it is or not, that I can't say because I'm fresh to it, but it should be the fastest track. And I believe that this goal of 5 billion, which has already been given by the Honorable Defence Minister, is an easy goal. The next goal should be the break-even, where exports and imports should break even. And the third and final goal should be when BOT, balance of trade, between exports and trade, should be in favor of exports. Which means exports should be bigger than imports. And I believe that all three sectors, as you said, public sector has already been given a chance. So we already had the chance of defense suppliers for the last 70 years. Private sector should be given a full chance, and you will be surprised if you do a great job. Entire auto sector, by the way, is private sector. So I think all the cars we have now are fantastic cars. Second, startups, and I represent SoftBank, and SoftBank funds $15 billion in India for 25 startups, and each startup is fantastic. And third, the multinationals who want to manufacture in India. So let's give a great opportunity to these private sector, multinationals and startups. And I can tell you in the next 5 years, you will see a transformation in the defense sector. That's my view. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kohli, somewhere I get an impression in the favorable trade winds that you've spoken about that the intent is there to contribute towards defense. But General Khandare, are there entry barriers that when we have our own research and development funded by the government, where you have captive research scientists, and then you have more or less captive manufacturers, which were DPSU, mainly the OFP, building the hardware of yesteryears and continuing to thrust it upon the military. And then, of course, the other DPSUs, which are more modern, more corporate in the nature, but still, the others have to come as a secondary tier to the first one. Are we going to move away from the secondary tier and make sure that the startups in the private sector cross those entry barriers? If we can define those entry barriers and the solution that we have that there are no entry barriers, could you describe the barriers that we can cross and help them cross?
General Pannu, one way is to look at it the way you explained. Looking at the kind of nominated orders which DPSUs get, and obviously there is a system which is in place which has consolidated in the last 7 decades or so. Is that the only thing that we have as an option? No. One is the latest technology or the niche technology which doesn't exist in India, which DRDO is expected to find, and then obviously they have to take a production partner for designing, development and production. So obviously that is one part which we accept. But these services require more than only the latest technology. They need product improvement, they need innovations. And innovations are something which the startups are very good at. And innovations are where the startups need to collaborate with the services and vice versa. It doesn't require too much of funding also. So I think even if we focus more on the innovation part, the less amount of funding that is required, this is one sector which will bring the startups to a healthy state. Whether we should have a playing field, level playing field for public and private sector, of course. Is it possible? No utopia is possible. So gradually, the private sector has to carve out a place for itself, and it is for the users, that is practitioners like me and you, who have to say, look, we have to go the private sector way because they offer you something better. All of us here who have worn uniform or are wearing uniform know one thing for sure. The products which we need and the products which have to be exported have to have basically four things. Commercially cost competitive. The technology has to be absolutely recent. The quantity that we need, we must get it in time. Otherwise, in most of the cases, you get the quantity by the time the technology is out of the window. And the fourth one is the post-sale service. Many of our exports have possibly failed and got a bad name because of that last one. In the commercially competitive element, if our DPSUs can't produce at a commercially competitive cost, then how does Pakistan do it? We've got to question ourselves. Why does Pakistan have such a good market of arms and ammunition sale in the Western world? The quality is good, the cost is down. So that is where again we have to start asking ourselves what is wrong. And the moment the private sector has come into this, I am sure there are bells ringing and even the public sector has to start getting things right. Otherwise, it won't last long. When the corporatization of the ordnance factories and conversion into 7 DPSUs has taken place, the government has given them 5 years. You prove in those 5 years that you are able to stand on your own feet. Otherwise, the call will be taken after 5 years. So again, I am trying to reiterate that the intent is clear, the direction is clear, but what is most important today, and that's where General Pannu's point comes up, we have to speed up. The technology and capability differential between us and our adversary is massive. Unless we catch up, the gap will continue to rise. So let's forget about incremental growth. We have to sprint, and we have to sprint like mad.
Thank you, General Kandare. In your initial introduction, you had mentioned about the venture capitalists. Mr. Manoj Kohli looks at how the funding can be done, but funding can only be done if there is some amount of assurance on return of investments. I'll ask Mr. Manoj Kohli, but before I ask him, I'm going to leave a question for you for later. That if the operational philosophy, the doctrines, the strategies, and the future equipment, not what you need immediately that the RFI comes out of the Revit, and then the RFP has to be responded to, and then those who have, those who don't have, quickly respond, otherwise the window is shutting down. So I think those long-term hand-holding and the vision statements which come and do not change with personalities is something that could be one of those things. But I'll go back to Mr. Kohli to ask. For anybody to fund the defense, what are the assurances and what is the conducivity of the environment do you think that the industry or the investor would look forward to? If you could give those bullet points, I suppose the MOD would make it possible for that condition.
Thank you, Janpan. Okay, let me share with you that VCs are investing billions and billions of dollars in it. For example, Brookfield, I was reading yesterday, they invested 25 billion. SoftBank has invested 15 billion. Similarly, many other VCs are. And they invest for businesses which show 5 characteristics. Number one, the product is acceptable to the customer. That's the first and most important, which you also mentioned. The product which a startup makes should be acceptable to Army or Air Force or Navy, wherever that product is going, and that product should be approved. And the second part of this is that product should also be scalable to global market. Maybe in phase 2. If it is scalable to global market, then it is plus. That number. Number 2, the technology, as you rightly said, has to be latest and should also evolve all the new features, all the new technologies which are coming out in the next 5 years. So no technological obsolescence should be there. Number three, the affordability of the product in terms of pricing should be acceptable to the customer. If it is not acceptable, there is a problem. So affordability is good. Number four is the profitable business model. Is the business model to manufacture it and deliver it, Army, Navy, Air Force, and to global market, is it profitable or not? And are the margins healthy? Initially, yes, in the first year, 18 months, 24 months, there could be a gestation period of no profits. That's fine, because every business has to go through a gestation period. But after gestation period, it should make healthy profits. And last but not the least, the startup should have a domain expert team, which is a domain expert team, and that is where your last point on service, after sales service, etc., they should be able to do very well. Otherwise, they won't be able to do if they're not domain experts. So these are, I would say, top five. There are a few others also, but top five parameters which VCs will study. And once they are happy with these five, they will be able to fund. My request to you, and my request to MOD, who is I think your advisor to MOD, is that please organize a conference for VCs, global VCs. They are all very interested in Indian economy at this time, but their understanding of defense is low. Their understanding what kind of big transformation which is happening in defense in India is very low. They don't know. So I think we have to pull up the knowledge level of these VCs by showing them what kind of potential the defense sector has in the next 10 years for domestic market and for export. And therefore, I can tell you one thing, that VCs will invest in the defense sector companies, whether they are startups or they are Indian private sector companies or even public sector companies. They will invest with open arms. That's my view.
Actually, Mr. Kohli also brought the whole discussion to the same point of question which I had already posed to General Kandare. How do you give a long-term view to the industry by writing off philosophies, doctrines, and the ecosystem? Today, defense budget is seen to be a burden on the nation. How can defense become a business for the nation, and how the defense budgets can be found from the defense earnings, as Mr. Manoj Kohli was saying? Don't only make it for India, make it for the globe, because if you're making the product for international standards, it will automatically get accepted, and I think Bharti had also mentioned about it. But before General Kandare tells us how the military should give a long view to the industry to understand what to produce and where to invest, I'm going to, in 2 minutes, ask one service officer and one representative from the industry to raise 2 questions before we close. But General Kandare, how can the military give a long-term view in those philosophies that can be argued?
I'll take this question also, and I have just one comment on what Mr. Kohli said. When you say domain experts, the moment you say domain expert, the popular picture that comes up is you need an engineer. You know, domain expert doesn't stop at only an engineer. When we have to do exports, the industry must look at people who know how things happen abroad. Every country there does not take decisions as you imagine from Indian prism. There are ways and means of getting decisions out of countries who are looking at importing stuff from India. You know, many a time we have people going abroad or appointing somebody, and that person goes on a jaunt and comes back and he says, you know, very difficult to do business in country A or country B. Obviously, business is difficult to get, but you must know the ropes. And I can share with a personal example that 2015 onwards, we changed the charter of our defense attaches. Earlier it was presumed that it is only a ceremonial kind of an appointment. No, it changed. the defense attaches were told that one of your charter is to promote defense sales abroad, and that is not restricted only to public sector. It is to do with Indian goods. Every possible Indian good is to be marketed. And then immediately defense production also supplemented some kind of a budget. So the whole idea is there are solutions in house. It's a question of your having the insight into it and the capability to find a solution rather than only reporting problems. If our attitude is going to be only continue to report problems, then we are an armed force of reporters. We have to be people capable of solving problems. That is my point. The second issue here is when we are saying we have to travel the journey together. One approach obviously is what General Pannu has said, that we have a document which gives out everything. I can suggest something in addition. You know, about 2 to 3 years back, we started looking at where are the gaps between people who are running this race together. And we realized we are not training together, we are not educating together. And last year we tried one experiment that in NDC we had a person from L&T undergoing that course for about a year. Why only NDC? Why only NDC, which is controlled by the MOD? Why can't services also look at this and get industry also to attend courses along with the officers? I think the longest journey can be covered without a document also, because you at least think alike, you understand the problem because you struggle together. Okay, those countries which have had conscription, they have an advantage over us because they've been practitioners there. Now, if you don't have conscription, at least open the doors, create an ecosystem where the industry also trains with you or gets educated with you, and vice versa. But the verticals and the silos are so stiff. I'll give you a small example here. Ordnance factories produce low technology equipment, but when we look at how many times our officers have visited these ordnance factories, hardly any. Have these ordnance factory officers who are government of India officers, have they visited the training establishment? Hardly ever. Because people say this is not in my charter. If it's not in your charter, the charter is not cast in stone. That document has not fallen from heaven. Somebody has to sit together, and when I'm saying sit together, they have to sit together, think together, work together, and then move ahead. Otherwise, we will continue to protect a system which we have not made, a system which we have inherited, and it is doing no good to anybody. So I think that is one possible way of doing it.
Thank you, Director.
Can I clarify one point?
Yes.
I think you made a very good point, sir. Once multinationals and private sector and startups are into the main fray of manufacturing for defense, and this I'm telling you from my experience of doing business in 35 countries, then you don't have to worry. They will export to 35 countries or 150 countries. And of course our ambassadors, our defense councils, etc. will support them and give them some guidance. But for example, in Africa I had 17 countries under me, and Asia had more countries. I knew the government, I knew private sector, I knew all the major players in that country with whom I have to do business and how to do business. This is, by the way, highest degree of corporate governance. Not in a wrong, in a right way. So my request to you is, as MOD, is not only utilize private sector and startups for manufacturing, but also they will themselves, for their own sake, globalize Indian products and market and sell Indian products because they're used to it. That is their business.
Just one more point here. And see, this is how the dialogue starts. The private industry knows how to do business abroad. These services, armed forces, have trained the senior officers of these foreign countries, but we've not networked them with the private industry. The chiefs of many of these foreign countries have been trained in India. But we've not networked them with our private industry for whatever reason. In fact, our training establishments, have not even maintained that kind of a contact because of government restrictions. Now is the time to take up issues that, okay, in this digitally connected world, what is wrong to remain connected as long as the security part is ensured? And okay, you don't want to remain connected, connect them to the private industry. Finally, it is an Indian who's taking advantage of it, and it is India which is taking advantage of it. That is exactly what I'm trying to say.
So this is very well said, and I feel that the ecosystem of the defense sector has to be defined and trusted. For example, I ran Airtel for 15 years. I had defined my ecosystem. It was Ericsson, Nokia, IBM, so many other partner companies, and they worked with me like a family. Now, because of sensitivity of defense, you may draw some lines. You may have some guidelines which private sector may not have. That is fine. You should have. But an ecosystem should be defined so that they work with you spontaneously, in a very spontaneous fashion, trustworthy fashion. I can tell you, next 5 years are crucial for this. If we are able to succeed, at the end of 5 years, 10 years, what is happening to US? I was, by the way, with a US defense supplier a few days back, who was my cousin in US. He was telling me, US government has defined the ecosystem very well. Not now, the last 50 years. And that's why US defense sector is the biggest exporter of US. Number one exporter of US. All over the world. Not only developed world, but also underdeveloped world. So they're doing a fantastic job earning billions and billions of profits for the country. And that is what we have to do. So we have to really open up, and what you said rightly, if you have trained the chiefs of other countries, those chiefs should be closely introduced to our sectors, our private sector, our startups. You know.
It is just that, the clock is ticking, and I think the naval chief would be just about leaving his office to this space. I had said 2 questions, but I do not have time. But if you think it is still popping out of your head, Dr. Naran, very short, few seconds of intervention.
Yes. So, ecosystem, testing sites from industry side are still ad hoc being allotted. Can we standardize and make it transparent? Second point. Can we increase the IP content? Because both auto and I still feel IP content is there. So what should we do for increasing the IP content? And the third point is standards. So far we have been imitating. For innovation we need these standards. Thank you.
Can I also, Manik, you raise your hand. Tell Manik. So I think you can just go ahead. Your voice is loud, and I've heard you.
Firstly, I have a variation on the panel. Firstly, this is a def1 summit. So I don't agree that the def technology index of India is very high, because the Department of Defense Production is steering this. And the question to General Khandare sir is that I'm also solving issue also. We are right now on this side of the fence. Do you think that the armed forces, the service headquarters officers are really doing much ahead? Because generally what I do more with industry on a daily basis, are they really coming together and work with industry more close? They talk with DARPA model in the US. So what are your views as to how, what I think I've discussed with you earlier also, as to how to push our own service headquarters officers dealing with industry without any strings attached?
Okay, thank you, Colonel Manik and Dr. Naran. I think together, just 1 minute each if you can
I
answer.
think Manik's question, whether you can take one. Services officers are doing a great job. Like I said, this is the beginning of the journey. The services officers are also evolving. Their approach, attitude is evolving. It is going to take time. We don't expect a finished product straight away. But what can be done better? I'm not here to rate people on a scale of 10. But I'm saying our training system needs to undergo a change. Our education system needs to undergo a change. The values, the ethos also need to undergo a change. To suspect everyone not in uniform is also wrong. We have to look at everyone as an Indian And we have to start from the premise that this is a team and we trust everyone. Yesterday I was speaking to somebody and I was telling him, look, private industry will approach you and the issue about standards and testing. And I got a curt reply, sir, if he's up to the mark, I'll approve. I said, no, we're not there to reject. We are there to mentor. If that person doesn't know, it's not his fault. He has not handled that equipment, you handled that equipment, and if you can mentor that person, you will do a great service to the nation. So I think people of my generation, that is Jal Pannu, me, Jal Sarat is here, we all are trying to do our best to mentor people. Everything is not about technical specification. At times it is about attitude also. If we are able to shape the attitude, it will happen. I just want one more point to be covered here, Jal Pannu. Prior to this, we spoke about edge computing. And what is important in defense space, which has also been opened up in the DEF Expo, the Prime Minister opened up the DEF space. Edge computing is going to be the most important thing that is required because we will be able to conserve the bandwidth because of onboard computing. This is the way to identify what is the journey ahead. IT, defense space, defense requirements, all that has to be looked together, and that is where the bigger industry can also guide the startups, because at times startups can only handle a component, but the entire subsystem of system can only be handled by a bigger company. So here, the role of the bigger companies also comes up, that they have to get hold of these smaller startups, handhold them and take them ahead. So all of us have to work together on it.
Thank you, Jan Kandare. Mr. Kohli,
30 seconds. 30 seconds. Okay. Just to respond to your question, you are absolutely right on standards, on IP, on various policies. I agree with Jansat that both policies and attitude has to be defined. Both will take us together. It's not only policy. Well, you can lay down standards policy, IP policy, etc. We should have a new policy for all these things. But at the same time, a positive nurturing attitude. You nurture, like I said, mentorship, etc. should be provided. Because the private sector hasn't worked with Indian defense. So startup boys and girls, young boys and girls haven't worked with Indian defense. So they are hesitant. They are kind of, their knowledge level is very poor. They don't know how to address, how to introduce, how to do it. So please educate them, help them, handhold them in the next 2-3 years, and you will see that blossom. So my feeling is next 5 years should be a lot of new policy so that it clarifies the scenario and a lot of positive attitude in nurturing the Indian private sector and Indian startups. Last but not the least, if we are comfortable importing billions and billions of dollars world over and we are trusting them, let us also trust our Indian business houses. Let us also do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Manoj Kohli, and thank you, Jan Kandare. I think this kind of a discussion can carry on for much longer and will benefit. I think it was time worth spending on a discussion with you both. DEFS Act, we are going to do in the same hall, 26